Hey there, it's Tandy from the Common Ground Alaska show, and I am really excited for today's show. As most of you know, we have pivoted from the show just being more of a conversation. We've actually pivoted to a strong emphasis on education, which fits with our whole mission of being a teaching farm. But this week, we're going to take a little bit of a different angle on the teaching aspect of things. And so today I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Chon from Genesis Coffee Lab. Jeff and his family are local to the Valley here for the most part, 6 months out of the year anyway. And they've been out to the farm and picked honeyberries, I think, right? You picked honeyberries and
Yes, and I wish I could have some right now.
they're good stuff. Anything fresh, I think, is appealing this time of year anyway. But one of my favorite aspects of the Chon family is that when they came out and they were picking and they were kind of sharing their story of Genesis Coffee Lab, it's just their strong dedication to what the Lord has called them to do, and they do it with everything they have in them. So
Mm.
today, I just suggest that you just grab a cup of coffee and listen. And Jeff is going to tell you the story of how God has been present and leading as they've grown their business and as they build their relationships through Genesis Coffee Lab. Jeff, I'm so glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tandy. It's truly a honor to be here to just meet you guys this past summer. We're both big Lakers. Woo!
Yeah,
You're
that's right.
literally
Woohoo on
7 minutes
Blake.
from my house, and so just local to local and believer to believer, it's just fun.
It
So
is. It is fun. Yeah, absolutely. We're glad to have you. So let's just start at the very beginning. How did Genesis Coffee Lab even get started?
yeah. So my wife and I had a real desire to work with orphans and widows. And so when we got married, shortly after we got married, through a friend, we ended up going to Ethiopia because she was a teacher. She actually worked in a missionary school in Korea for 7 years as well.
Wow.
And I was a youth pastor by trade. I went to Bible college to be youth pastor, so I just love youth and done multiple mission stuff. I went to school in South America for a year, learning Spanish. So just both of us had overseas experience. And so when we went to Ethiopia, we first heard about the little devastation there of 4.5 million orphans in one country. And so we were just like, okay, this is going to be an interesting trip. And so we went there through a friend to meet a local church there. And through that experience, I can honestly say this was the summer of 2005. It's the most I've ever cried. I have never cried so much in my life. I have never seen thousands and thousands and thousands of street kids with no food, barely any clothing. And I didn't know what to do but to cry. Just like, I mean, if you have any heart to just see that level of poverty when you're not used to that. I mean, there's obviously poverty in the United States, but you really can't compare that with a third world country. And to just see that in that level was so heartbreaking, and it was impossible for my wife and I to leave that experience and not want to do something about that. There's just no way we could fly back to Alaska and be like, oh, that was a cool mission trip. What a great time. It was just more like, oh my gosh, how can we help in any way we can? And so that's kind of the birth, I guess, of Ethiopia and Genesis Coffee Lab. And so while we were in Ethiopia, because we were the Alaskans visiting, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're like the first Alaskans to go to the rural areas of Ethiopia. And actually, that's a fact. We did go to one place in Ethiopia where we were the first foreigners to ever come to their village.
Whoa.
Isn't that, I mean, there's a few things that I could go like, yep, I've been a part of that, but to say I went to a village where they had never seen a foreigner was pretty special.
Wow.
So because unfortunately so much of the rural area is poor, I think the average Ethiopian makes like $100 to $200 a year in the rural area. Pretty poor.
Yeah. Wow.
They weren't able to serve us, food and put a spread out of, all your, moose and caribou and, fresh produce. They had coffee. It's the birthplace of coffee. That's where God put it. In the beginning, God put coffee in Ethiopia. That's right there in Genesis. Okay. I could prove it. In the beginning, God created. So nobody will argue the birthplace of coffee. So we would drink 8 to 10 cups of coffee sometimes because everybody wants to bless the foreigners. And so as we would drink coffee, this idea came to us slowly of, hey, we want to do missions work. The Apostle Paul did it through making tents. The
Mm.
Apostle Paul, if you think about it, he was in the mobile home industry back in his day. He was an incredible tent maker. It's right there in the book of Acts. He even had business partners, Priscilla and Aquila. So the Apostle Paul, who is like, to me, one of the greatest examples of preaching the gospel and changing the face of the planet through planting churches in the gospel, he was also a businessman making tents. And so we wanted to do something similar of like, how can we do something where we're not asking people for help or asking for donations, but truly wanting to give people a wonderful service or product and use that for missions. And coffee, it was like a light, boom, we should do coffee. So that's kind of how this all started.
Wow. Okay.
Speaking
That
of coffee, here we go.
That's right. I love that so much. That's great. So I actually read this morning in my devotional reading um a quote by Oswald Chambers. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Faith never knows where it's being led, but it loves and knows the one who is leading." So there you are in Ethiopia and you're thinking, I want to somehow help, but it had to have been horribly overwhelming because even anything that you could physically do would be a drop in the bucket. So maybe you could help sponsor. I don't know how the I don't know how it works as far as helping the homeless children, but if there's more than two or three, what can you really do? Like there must have been almost a helpless feeling thinking there's so many and there's no way we can help them all. And then so I love the just kind of slowly allowing God to lead and not necessarily knowing what you're doing, but in the meantime, you're drinking coffee, native coffee, and praying through this. What are we supposed to do? And then coffee becomes the center of the show, kind of. Okay, so you decided this was where the Lord was leading you, but then what? Like you can't, nobody. I've started a couple of businesses. You don't just say, okay, we're gonna do this, and then
Yeah.
everything falls in your lap.
So that example you just gave from Oswald Chambers, by the way, was that devotional My Utmost for His Highest?
I got it out of a different one that I read, but I
Okay,
was
I
wondering
like that
the
one.
same thing.
I did that one, but
It's such a good one.
yes, we were basically speechless in like, what can this little Alaskan couple do? Who the heck are we to even think we could do anything? But because God was in it and we knew He was in it and it changed our lives, we took a lot of time and prayed because we were just like, what can we even do? And just through a lot of prayer, um, we just felt like, well, you know what? God put the church on the planet for a reason. So let's just start with working with the local church. And so one of the churches in Ethiopia, one of the local elders, one of the leaders in the local church had such a heart for the children that he started a kindergarten in his backyard.
Wow.
So we actually, and this is actually where the Lord, like cattle branding when they sear cattle, like, this is where the Lord seared me personally. Was we were in the rural area visiting this pastor and his leadership team for the church. And they said, hey, we want to show you our little kindergarten in our backyard. So he built a little mud hut and there was 50 kids in there. And it was the first time in my life where they said, hey, can you share a message to the children? And I just wept. I was like, what do you preach to 50, 60 little kids? They were actually ministering to me. I remember one of the kids had been converted from Islam to Christianity,
Mm.
a kindergartner.
Wow.
with tears down their face saying how they encountered the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm like, me preach? You're preaching to me. Like I don't have anything to preach to you. You're on fire for God. Like you're like what, 5, 6 years old, experiencing the Lord Jesus Christ. I was like, here, how about I sit down and you guys tell me your stories? And I ended up not preaching because I just couldn't. I was so emotionally just like blown away by seeing a little mud room full of kids that love the Lord. I
Mm.
mean, come on, like what? I was expecting like some depressed scenario, and it was actually the opposite. Was like they literally had the joy of the Lord. Well, anyways, um, that's when we felt like let's sow into this school. Let's just start small. You know what? We don't have to do anything huge. Let's just be obedient with the little that's right in front of us. There's a relational connection to this church. Let's sow into this. Well, guess what? That school started with 50 kids in a mud hut. It is now 1,200 strong, all the way through high school. It's become the #1 school academically in the entire region. So imagine a region the size of the Matsu Valley, that this school is #1 academically. So many, God has provided so many teachers.
Mm.
He's provided land, construction workers. They have literally like a humongous, like multi-acre compound for this school. It's become respected in the government. The government officials respect the school. So God took a little mud hut. This just sounds like what the Lord does, right? He takes your little bread and loaves, and your fishes, and he multiplies it with if you obey and you believe. And that's what has happened with this school. And so we continually have been sowing into this school now for 18 years.
Wow.
But it all started with just a little seed of like, here, we'll sow a little bit here. And then, the momentum. And now they just started a few years ago. I actually felt from the Lord, they were buying bread from a local bakery. Well, this idea just came to me. It's like, well, why don't you guys teach the kids to make your own bread? And they just opened a bakery a few
Oh,
months.
that's really neat.
So instead of buying hundreds of little rolls
Mhm.
from the local baker and spending, buying stuff retail, God provided them an oven and a mixer, and now they're able to teach the kids a trade of being a baker. And
Exactly.
so I encourage the leaders, we're pastors there, we're leaders there. So they're just like, hey, Jeff, you guys have been sowing into our ministry and our school for almost 2 decades. If you feel like the Lord thinks a bakery is a good idea, we'll pursue it. And they did. And so we sowed into it, and multiple people sowed into this idea, and they just opened a few months ago. The pastor sent me a picture of all the kids with the organic, locally, made roll. By the way, the grains are superior in Ethiopia. It's totally different. Like there's gluten things here that I eat and my stomach feels weird, but you eat like the ancient grains basically there, and it's like, well, it's totally different. I don't feel bloated. Anyways, they opened a bakery, and now they're able to sell bread to the community. They're able to bless the kids with something to eat daily at school. And so we're not just thinkers of like, how can we help? We don't just want to help people. We want to teach people how to fish. We don't
Yeah.
want to just throw things at people. As a business, as a fan, and this is what I teach my own kids. Like, hey, there's no handouts in the kingdom. The only main handout I could think of is the Lord Jesus Christ dying for us and giving us salvation. But now it's our responsibility to take up our cross and follow him, right?
Right.
That's our part. He's drawn near. Now we need to draw near to him. And it's the same thing in Africa. Africa is seeing billions of dollars of aid come through, and it evaporates because people are not being discipled. Oh, isn't that interesting? And so
What a
that's
concept.
that's that's really at the core of Genesis. It's like, hey, I'm not going to hand anything out to you because it wasn't handed to me. We're a business. We're a real business. We work very hard to provide for our family. We work very hard to bless our community with good coffee, but I'm not handing you anything. I'll invest in you, but you're going to have to learn to work. You're going to have to learn to get out of poverty. It's not going to be handed out. That's not a kingdom principle. And so we don't tell people, oh, we go to Africa and we give people coffee and bread. No, 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 no. We disciple people so that they can disciple their own people. They don't need a handout. They just need a little push. They just need it's just a fact. We're Americans, so we have more resources. So instead of using that to be like, we're the saviors, Western missionaries come to, no. It's more like, hey, how about we help you get an oven and a mixer? Now you go make the bread and sell it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to want to report in a year.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
Discipleship.
totally. And that's a little, the word foreign comes to mind, but I don't know if that's about, but it is a little foreign to the way of life right now in America. That's I see there are plenty of people who do have that ideal of working hard and bringing people, whether it would be a entrepreneur, like bringing on an apprentice or something, or whatever it is, or doing something to give people just a leg up, but then giving them the responsibility to make it happen and make it work. And so I think that's incredible. And plus your sense of accomplishment for something is so much greater when you've done it yourself. To give the school, if you could have said, well, because you have to buy this bread and it's a financial drain on the school, we're going to supply your bread. So you could have found a supplier for bread and brought them bread. But instead, by spending that money investing in them learning and they're making their own bread, now you've got this picture with these students who are proud of what they're making, and who knows how that's going to spread throughout. That's going to be fun to see what comes of that, for sure.
Yeah. Living out in the bush too. I lived in Bethel. I'm a graduate of Bethel High School out in rural Alaska. I lived in Bethel for 8 years.
Okay.
So I got 8 years of bush in me. And in my experience, there's a lot of parallels with Africa and the bush. And the one thing I notice in between both places is there's been a lot of aid. There's been a lot of government things, and those are good and not good at the same time. We don't have to go into details about that, but the point being is everybody's called to work. And whether you have barely anything, the whole point of the parable of the talents, the whole point of the parable of the minas is multiply what you got. Multiply what you got. If you're born into poverty, that's out of your control, but you don't have to stay there. You don't have to stay there. No matter what, you don't have to stay there. If you're born into it, it's understandable. And so our heart with Genesis is to really disciple people, even in Ethiopia, to say, hey, you're in a terrible situation and it's truly hard, but God is with us. And he can do immeasurably more than what we can possibly think or imagine, and do it on our own. And what's impossible for man is possible for God. So the key is for us is to tune into what the Lord is doing and obey and go for it. And so we really feel that, as believers, that our job isn't to show them how to become an American. Our job is to say, hey, what's your talent in front of you? What can you multiply? And so an example, this would be a friend of mine who worked in the coffee industry for almost a decade. He told me a couple of years ago, he said, hey, I'm thinking of starting my own coffee business instead of working for these big companies in Ethiopia. And so we invested in him. We said, you know what? You're an amazing producer. I really think you have the maturity, you have the expertise, you have what it takes. And we would love to see you, run your own coffee farm and business and stuff. He grew like 100% in 1 year.
Wow.
He literally has people coming from Asia to see his coffee farms. International buyers have been lined up in 1 season.
Wow.
And it's just like, that's what happens when you invest in people. And that's really, if I were to sum up, like, what's Genesis Coffee Lab? What do we do? Well, okay, yeah, of course we sell coffee, but I had youth pastors, I had people sow into my life. I had people that sacrificed to say, hey, Jeff, you were a drug dealer, you were a messed up teenager, but you found the Lord Jesus Christ. Let us love you and disciple you. There's you don't your parents divorced, you were suicidal, you were depressed, but you've given your life to Christ and we want to disciple you. And and that's basically what we're doing, is we're doing the very thing that the Lord did for us through people
Mhm.
to Ethiopia. We don't have a lot to offer other than, hey, we would love to invest in you relationally and see you become successful in the Lord and bless your community. That's really the heartbeat of who we are, is because that's what was done for me. When I got saved, my parents divorced. I literally got kicked out of the house when I told my dad I became a Christian, because my dad is a Buddhist. And so he literally at 15 years old, okay, I'm not exaggerating, at 15 years old, my dad and I were face to face, and he said, Jeff, if you're going to follow this Jesus, get out of the house right now. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're going to kick me out of the house for wanting to follow Jesus and actually want to do my homework and become a good student? He's like, yep. And I am not joking. For almost 8 months, I lived with different friends in pantries. Man, I could almost cry right now, but I lived in pantries. I slept on floors. I've slept in bedroom, like just random, I was kind of like you know, Jeff loves Jesus. His parents kicked him out of the house, but he really needs help and assistance. And I felt like a charity case often, but people don't know what do you do with someone like me? This doesn't really happen in America where you get kicked out of your house for following Christ. And so it was kind of a dilemma for people, even like, do we put it? I was like, I'm not gonna deny my faith. And so, long story short, there was a missionary couple that lived in Bethel, and they had been missionaries in Haiti for almost 15 years, and God called them to Bethel, Alaska from Haiti.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the day I was a junior in high school, living in different friends' homes, and this precious lady came up to me and said, I heard about your story. The Lord told me that you needed a mother. Will
Mhm.
you come over for dinner and meet with us? I said, sure. I went over to their house, and I literally bawled like a baby, because it was the first time I had felt like a mother and father's love. And
Mhm.
in one dinner, they said, we would like to take you in as like our spiritual son. You don't need to be living in friends' bedrooms and pantry floors. You need parents. And even though we can't adopt you and go through all that, we'll give you the keys of the house. We'll give you the keys of the car, and you're going to be our son. And to this day, they're my parents and they're my kids' grandparents. And having experienced the Lord Jesus Christ's grace and mercy and love to that level, there's no way I can't do that for others. It's like there's just this thing in me of like, you know what? People don't just need a discipleship book. They need hands and feet. I'm just so thankful that the Father sent Jesus and not another prophet. We needed to see God in flesh to understand this thing called Christianity. And I believe that when Jesus said, go make disciples of all nations, that's what he meant. He meant it for us to be the hands and feet of him to others so people can see it. And so it's a lot of work, it's hard work, but man, we can honestly say we have a lot of deep relationships in Ethiopia that are beyond business. In fact, this next month, without this, I'm very excited about this. I'm going to be in my first Ethiopian wedding as a best man. So
Oh,
next month when we go to Ethiopia to, check, just check in with the church and the ministries and the coffee business, I'll be in my first wedding as a best man. And that's just really a testament to the Lord of our way of doing business and ministry is relationships.
yeah.
It's 100% relationships. And it's just, I felt so honored when my friend called me up recently and said, hey, would you be my best man at the wedding? I was like, and even he's been taking some flack because people are like, this is not the Ethiopian way of doing wedding. Like, who is Jeff? And he's just like, well, he's been a brother and leader in my life for years. And I couldn't think of anyone else to have as my best man. And so it's just the way it's how we roll. We roll relationally and we love discipleship. I would rather help 2 people than 2,000. And that's just it. The multitude needs help. Jesus did that, but there's something amazing that Jesus spent most of his time with 12. And so I think there's something powerful when we focus on oh, this answers your question. Like, it was overwhelming going to Ethiopia. So let's start discipling one person,
Yeah.
and then two, and then three, and then you get my point.
Yeah.
So it's been 19 years now, and I'm planning to do it until the Lord takes me home. And
Mm.
and our couple of our older kids feel called to Ethiopia. So now it's becoming generational, which I could just, as a dad, I could jump up out of this seat is a proud dad, in a good way of like, you know what, this is amazing. I had no idea that through the level of sacrifice and commitment we've made to this nation, that even my grown children, my oldest son's graduating this year, he's just like, Dad, I think I'm called to Ethiopia too. It's just like, come on, that's just like, as a parent, you're just like, this is so cool. Not like, I want to be a rock star, or I want to be, I want to help the poor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the legacy that you're leaving. There's more to your business than just, profit and loss statements and financial goals. It's building a legacy business that will be passed on to your kids and to other people in, who knows whose lives are being touched in America too. It's not just Ethiopia. So I want to make sure that we have time to tell the story. So take me from the time you decided to start Genesis Coffee to actually, there's usually there's usually some serious God moments in that, when you say, all right, we're going to do this, Lord. And then that's kind of when the rubber meets the road. There's always some good stuff there.
I'll try to wrap that as quickly as I can, to honor your time. But before I do that, I just want to tell you, Tandy, when we went to your farm, saw your husband, saw your daughter, I thought, you know what? That's that's what we're going after right there. This is a family business with legacy, excellence, involving our children. I felt that same thing. It may not be Ethiopia, but you know what? The kingdom of God isn't bound by a country; it's bound by people. And so, I just want to tell you, when I first went to your farm and saw your
Aw,
daughter and just her involvement, I was like, "This is so cool. This
that
is just so cool,
that really touches my heart.
so cool." Spoke
That's
to me.
Well, thank you. That's confirming, because the Lord had started speaking to me about 18 months ago, and then to my husband a few months back, about making this farm more of a legacy and involving even our adult kids. And there's parts of that story aren't mine to tell right now, but it's just been incredible seeing, kind of, like the Oswald Chambers quote, you just take the step that God is leading. And a couple of the steps that we've taken didn't even make any sense. And, but in hindsight, they do. But
Mhm.
in forward sight, it didn't make any sense at all. Especially, timing was different. As there's a certain amount of planning in running a business, right? And you have to do certain, whatever, you have your projections and whatever. And but then when that God piece comes in, and he leads you to something that doesn't just quite fit in with your own plans, on paper, that I've written down, that were these are Tandy's ideas, and this is Tandy's plan, and we're going to stick with it, and we're going to move forward. And then God steps in and says, I think we're going to take a detour. And it's the surrender of that is super, super rewarding. But we just were reading, obviously, based on this quote, we just were talking this morning in our devotional time about really knowing when it's the Lord, and then stepping forward boldly. And sometimes the other thing that I think has been incredible for us is sometimes we've stepped forward in faith, not even realizing that's what we're doing. And then you look back and you think that was pivotal, that was monumental. And yet
Mhm.
it really wasn't that big a deal at the time. It was just the next thing.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. Anyway, so I don't mean to take away from your story,
No,
but
no, no,
I
no.
I appreciate what you said, because that's definitely where we have felt the Lord leading, especially more recently with even our other kids. And so it's fun to see him work out the details, because I couldn't figure it out myself. So funny how that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I still haven't figured out a lot of things, but so the long story short is we did something very not smart in the world's eyes, and my wife was a teacher for a couple decades. In fact, she used to even work for the largest, Idea homeschool. She was a contact teacher, so
Oh,
she
nice.
was we've been homeschooling our kids their whole lives, and we'll continue to. But she was a contact teacher, so she was educating parents about how to homeschool their kids, and so our kids definitely got it good. They still do. They have a teacher who's helped parents, and anyways, we took my wife's retirement, liquidated it to start our business. So you talked about taking steps of faith, the risk, and those things, and it doesn't make any sense. People be like, "Are you kidding me? Why would you take your retirement and start a business?" And we just felt like, you know what? If the Lord's leading us, and we did feel it, there's going to be an act of faith. I don't think God ever calls us to anything that doesn't require faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. So if this really is a God-sized dream, there's probably going to be a mixture of faith and risk in it. And so we did it. And did it give me a gray hair? I think it did. I'm sure Peter felt every emotion you can imagine walking on water for a few seconds, but that's part of the process. And so we did that. And because truly we're like, you know what? We believe in so much of our friends in Ethiopia and in this coffee. And we truly we're Alaskans. Like, just because we travel a lot people all the time like, did you change your driver's license? I'm like, absolutely not. Are you kidding me? No, I am never gonna get like, you can't. I'm a hunter, fisherman. Our business is there, our home. Of course not. But I love Alaska so much. I wasn't born there, but 28 years is a long time, and 8 of those were in the bush. So, and all 4 kids were born in Alaska. So I'd say we're Alaskan. But we have such a high value for our local produce, our fish and game. But the reality is, when it comes to coffee, it's kind of like, what is that blend you're selling? And kind of like me, like, I love telling people, like, hey, I shot my caribou on the Denali Highway and I made that sausage myself, or I grew my berries, or I grew my potatoes, right? But when it comes to coffee, it's like, well, what the heck is that blend? And so we truly wanted to bring wild coffee to a state that appreciates wild. And so we liquidated her retirement and we went for it. We learned how to become importers first, because we didn't want our coffee to change hands with people we didn't trust. That's the bottom line. Tandy, if you're going to sell your produce, you don't need another person to do it for you. You'd like to do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And boy, that took almost 3 years to figure out. But Genesis Coffee Incorporated is the importing part of our business. Genesis Coffee Lab is our roasting part. And so from the literal point of that coffee being grown and picked, we know every single part of the chain.
Mm.
Every single part. We guarantee none of our farmers are trafficked. None of our farmers are being raped. None of our farmers are being child slavery. We know exactly who's taking care of our coffee. Most of the coffee industry can't claim that. We can. Our coffee is sourced. Our farmers are treated properly. In fact, one of our producers, they pray before they work and they pray before they end the day to honor the Lord. To me, if I'm going to bring Alaska some of the best coffee in the world, I have to know the whole process. And we do. So we know that our farmers are truly being taken care of, being paid correctly. We know that the quality, the meticulousness of the cleaning and the process is being done right in Ethiopia. We pay the extra money to bag our stuff in 2 bags in transit so it doesn't mold during the process. It's called a Grain Pro bag. Our coffee is put into a Grain Pro, then a burlap jute bag on top of that to make sure that in the 6 to 8 weeks of transit time across a humid ocean, that our coffee doesn't get mold, because mold is toxic. So we believe that taking care of people and your product to the highest level is necessary. And that's what we wanted to bring to Alaska. And there's a reason within 2.5 years into our business, Food and Wine Magazine, which is one of the most respected food and beverages sources in the world, named us the best roaster in the state. You can't submit for that. It's totally anonymous. There's no politics involved. There's no submission. There's no fees. In fact, I was roasting one day at the warehouse, and a client sent me a message. Hey, congratulations. And I said, for what? I'm just working. There's no, he's like, you just got named best roaster in the state of Alaska from Food and Wine Magazine. And I'm not a big Food and Wine Magazine person necessarily, but I'll take it. Hey, if the world recognizes that this is the best in the state, praise God. I'll glorify God through the process. But it's just like he blesses people that take their business seriously and with integrity, that even the world will recognize it.
Yep.
Right.
And then you're off to the races.
Yep. And now we've opened our second roastery now here in North Carolina, because our demand in the lower 48 is as you know, shipping things to Alaska is really expensive, and shipping stuff out of Alaska is really expensive. And so we thought, you know what? We felt the Lord leading us to grow our business so that we can help more kids. It's that simple. That's our equation. More money, more business equals helping more people. That simple. And so we took another step of faith of taking most of our profits and just opening another location. Instead of taking the money and, buying this and that or whatever, we just thought, you know what, let's keep growing the business. And so we have a second roastery where we fulfill all of our lower 48 orders out of North Carolina.
Wow.
So that's why we're here.
Well, obviously the Lord is leading you in all of the things that you're doing. We had, I just want to share a quick piece of the kind of the farm God story too. Because to me anyway, it's pretty impactful. When, the kind of big overlying story of the farm that we don't really talk about a lot, because it's not, it impacts our day-to-day life, but we don't want it to impact everyone else's day-to-day life. But just shy, I think in about a month, it'll be 5 years ago, Jean sustained a brain injury that was, 5 years, that pretty much was life-altering for him, for all of us, but especially for him, because, when we bought this property 20 years ago, he logged all the trees to build the house, he and the boys. And, he built the house, he, constructed the whole thing. I kind of drew on paper where I wanted the kitchen and the living room. And then he took it from there and planned trusses and, did all the things. And Gene has just always, he built us a barn, he built all the greenhouses. He's just an extremely capable person. Kind of, I call him larger than life. So to then suddenly have your brain not function the way that, it was supposed to, and, there's a lot to that. But here's the part that, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on where God was in this. And, 11 years ago this summer, Gene approached me and he said, I just want to plant a few trees. I want to plant some apple trees, he said. And we'd already done a CSA for a while, and it was a vegetable CSA, and we both were working full time, and trying to do a vegetable CSA at the same time was just like, it just made our summers impossible. And so it was too much. And so he said, I think we should go the route of an orchard, because it'll take less time from us. When you're not having to replant all the time, and we can come up with some good weed things. And orcharding really was just that was his kind of passion when it came to farming. And so just stepping forward in faith, we just continued to plant as the Lord brought all these amazing customers. And let me tell you, we have met some of the neatest people in the state. And I keep thinking, how can there be this many wonderful people and still be like crime and bad things? Because we just have so many fabulous customers. But looking back now, again, this is kind of the hindsight of it. The orchard is very therapeutic for Gene. He can work as much as he's able, and it's very natural to him, to the things that he does out there. And so it's given him something to occupy himself. He is not, no, brain injuries are terrible because for lots of reasons, but it's given him something to occupy himself and give him purpose, but he can do it on his own time. When he's having a tougher day, he can do something that maybe doesn't require as much from, and when he's having a little better day, then maybe that's when he can do his pruning and things like that. And so God knew when Gene planted, it makes me cry. See, I'm going to cry right along with you. When we planted that very first tree, God knew that this was not only going to be what Gene needed to maneuver the stupid world of work comp, the horrifically corrupt world of workers' compensation, and this brain injury that has completely changed his life. Plus, it's now providing for our family. So little did we know we were going to need that. We both kind of had the tiger by the tail. He had a career, I had a business, and we didn't know God's plan. And when we planted that first tree, this was nowhere near the scope of where we thought we were headed. But I'm glad we did it. And it's so encouraging for God's to remember God's faithfulness, especially when the world gets, crazy, or just when things on the farm get a little nutty, or, whatever, when things happen, when life happens, to be able to reflect back on God's faithfulness and to remember, Gene's just saying, can we plant a few apple trees, and not having any idea that we were walking in the degree of obedience that we were. He meets us where we are. He doesn't, although it does, like you said, the faith, it totally requires faith. I think of the Rich Mullins song, "Faith without works is like a screen door without or like a screen door on a submarine," right? Like it's weightless. So one of my favorite songs.
I like that.
But I want to kind of, well, Jeff, first I want to ask you really quick, is there anything that you wanted to add before I close?
I said it earlier, just about when we visited your farm, I could feel the depth of it because of the family involvement. And I just knew it wasn't like, this lady sells really good berries and stuff. So it's cool to hear the deeper layers of it. So that was the main thing. And that was it.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate when you came out, you brought, we have a minute to touch on this really quick. You didn't just bring your family, right? Do I remember
We
right?
brought one of our coffee producing daughters from Ethiopia with us.
Right, exactly.
She interned with us this summer in Alaska. So she got to see the United States in Alaska for the first time, and she got to see mosquitoes.
Well,
But she did say that your berries were unbelievably amazing. So,
well, thank you.
yeah, you had an Ethiopian at your farm. How cool is that?
We did. I hadn't thought about
From
that.
a coffee farm to an apple orchard berry farm.
That's right. That's right. I just think, because I'm in the food world too, a little differently, but as we see the food world is getting just weird, to know there's just something. So, they say know your farmer. Well, when you're drinking coffee, you can't, right? Like you can't come to my farm in Alaska and buy coffee beans that I've grown, because it's, physically impossible. So for you to take the steps, to know every piece of that production, and to know that nothing is trafficked, no one is abused, no one is being exploited in any way. And Instead, you're doing the exact opposite, but you're building relationships and you're building communities. And that just I don't even, like, I'm speechless kind of on even how to, there's not adjectives to describe how awesome that is. So thank you for the work that you've done. I sent you the quote when we started to record this. I said that the quote from the movie The Sound of Freedom: when God tells you what to do, you cannot hesitate. And I think so I just kind of want to wrap up with this idea that for anyone who's considering starting a business, number one, you have to understand that your business is going to be so much bigger than you. You have to have that vision from the beginning. Yes, there are definitely times when, you have to sit down with the financial side of the business. That's important. We have to be financially wise in order to be in ministry, right? Because there's no way to minister to other people when you're drowning yourself. So, but you have to take those steps of faith, and you have to know where those are. In our conversation this morning, when Jean and I were talking about what that looks like, we recalled a couple of times that we had been kind of led in a direction and we weren't sure that it was the Lord showing us. And instead of praying about it and spending time in the Word and seeking counsel from wise people and really just kind of looking and seeing where he was working, instead of doing that, we let some balls drop. And thankfully, we serve a really big God who I can't thwart his plan. I'm not that powerful. So he knows our shortcomings, and he's already planned for those. Like, it's not like I can one day be myself and do something and then he just isn't saying, well, shoot, I hope that would have worked out better for him. That's not how our God works. And but having that bigger picture as well, and understanding that we're not just doing this for ourselves, but we're doing it for future generations, whether it would be for our kids and grandkids, or for the community or for countries or whatever. Amy Fuel, I'm going to read this. Amy Fuel wrote something that just totally went aligned with what we're saying. She said, I recently heard someone ask the question, are you stewarding well the things that God has dropped into your lap, called you to do, or blessed you with? For example, if a certain career fell into your lap, are you stewarding it well for the kingdom? If he called you into a ministry, are you stewarding that well for the kingdom? And if you have a family, are you stewarding them well for the kingdom? It's easy for us to try to chase the next thing just for money, just because. But what about the things he has firmly planted in you to steward? Have we allowed firm roots to take hold and water and nurture it, or is it shallow rooted and we just hope to make it? And then she asks the question, she says, if you're in business, do you have a business plan or a stewardship goal? You cannot grow without vision. And if you have a farm, what are your family farm goals? Are you working towards them together? And again, that was Amy Fuel from Homesteaders of America, but it just kind of aligned with what we were talking about today. So Jeff, I hope that our conversation today is encouraging to others who are considering starting a business or starting a farm or starting to, grow coffee. Not really. I do wish we could grow coffee here, but whatever our listeners are looking to do, I hope that they will seek the Lord with all their heart and know that we are praying for future, partnerships and things, just because it's so powerful to be part of what the Lord is doing. And as the world is kind of topsy-turvy, I guess, I don't know what else to call it, we need that strong foundation, and that we need to be reliant on that rock. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. Your story is so encouraging and exciting, and we just absolutely love having you in Big Lake, and we're really grateful for your ministry and for your coffee. Jean is very thankful for your coffee.
Thank you so much, Tandy. You guys are a huge blessing, such an encouragement. I can't even wait to come home this summer to come visit. And thank you so much. It's an honor to be a part of what the Lord's doing and through your work too. And just to know there's another family in the same town, literally just trying to have a business that provides for our family and our communities, and to do an amazing job and honor the Lord through it. His blessing will be on that. And so thank you so much. And neat to hear another layer of your story too. Very powerful. You had my eyes watering when your eyes were watering, you know. The faith, I mean, when we truly ponder the faithfulness of God, it should bring us to tears, because we wouldn't be here without him, period.
Boy, you've got that right. And I think just the fact that for sometimes I do see it, sometimes we're in turmoil or whatever, and we really do see God, but it's the mundane that he's faithful in. Planting a couple apple trees and building a fence around them to know that it was going to turn into 5 or 7 acres of family business, and we're able to impact people. And the same for you, a trip to Ethiopia, and the next thing you know, you're cashing out your retirement. You're just going crazy.
Trip to Ethiopia from Wasilla. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. It's been encouraging. And for if you're looking for really good coffee, definitely check out Genesis Coffee Lab. You can get it fresh, super fresh, every week at
Every week.
Bears. Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, Jeff. You have a good day.
Thanks. Thank you. Have a good one.